I'm Margaret, 68 years old, and last Christmas I couldn't wait to host my family gathering. My 3 adult children and their families would all be under my roof again. The gift exchange has always been special to me, a chance to show how well I know each loved one. For weeks, I've been preparing, baking, and wrapping presents with care. Despite what my kids might think, I still feel young at heart. Before I share what happened that day, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories from this grandmother who finally found her voice. Looking back, I suppose I should have seen the signs earlier. After losing my husband Gerald to heart disease 8 years ago, I'd thrown myself into being the best mother and grandmother I could be. My 3 children had been my whole world since they were born, and even more so after they lost their father. Eleanor, my oldest at 42, had always been the ambitious one. She worked her way through law school, and now she's a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm in the city. She married Thomas, a quiet but kind investment banker, and they have 2 teenagers, Sophia and Nathan. Sophia just turned 16 and is already talking about college, while Nathan is 14 and obsessed with computer programming. Eleanor has always been practical to a fault, scheduling her calls with me for exactly 30 minutes every Sunday evening. My son Robert is 39 and works as a marketing executive. He married Jessica, a former model turned interior designer, and they have 3 beautiful children: Lily, 10, Jackson, 8, and Emma, 5. Robert was always the social butterfly, the life of every party. When he was young, I used to work extra shifts at the hospital just to pay for his sports equipment and summer camps. Now he lives in a house 4 times the size of mine with a swimming pool and home theater. Still, I cherish the memories of him as a little boy who couldn't fall asleep without me reading him a story. Amanda, my youngest at 35, followed in my footsteps somewhat by going into medicine, though she became a pediatrician rather than a nurse like me. She married Daniel, a professor of literature, and they have 4-year-old twins, Abigail and William. Amanda was my sensitive child, the one who noticed when I was tired or sad. Lately, though, she's been so consumed with her practice and the twins that our conversations mostly revolve around her needing me to babysit or advice about the children. For all 3 of them, I put my own dreams on hold. I worked night shifts as a nurse for 30 years, so I could be present during their daytime activities. I never took a vacation that wasn't centered around their schedules or needs. The photography classes I wanted to take? Postponed until they were in college. The painting supplies I bought myself one Christmas? Still unopened after I spent that holiday season helping Eleanor prepare for her bar exam. Over the past couple of years, I'd noticed subtle changes in how they treated me. Robert would check his watch multiple times during our lunches. Eleanor would speak more slowly when explaining new technology, as if my brain had slowed down with age. Amanda would make decisions about my grandchildren's care without consulting me, despite my decades of experience as a pediatric nurse. "Mom, that's not how things are done anymore," became a common refrain, usually followed by an exchange of glances between them that they thought I couldn't see. I tried to stay involved in their lives without overstepping. I remembered my own mother becoming increasingly isolated as she aged, and I was determined not to let that happen to me. I sent thoughtful texts, remembered important meetings, asked specific questions about their lives. Sometimes it felt like shouting across an ever-widening canyon. "We're just so busy, Mom," they would say. Or, "We'll catch up properly soon." But soon kept getting pushed further into the future. The instances of them treating me as outdated or irrelevant increased. When I mentioned trying a new recipe I found online, Robert seemed genuinely surprised that I knew how to use Pinterest. When I commented on a current event, Eleanor would say, "That's sweet, Mom," as if having an opinion at my age was somehow cute rather than normal. When I suggested a treatment for Abigail's rash based on my nursing experience, Amanda smiled tightly and said, "Medicine has advanced quite a bit since your day." Still, I loved them fiercely. I kept all their childhood artwork, school awards, and important mementos carefully preserved. I maintained traditions they'd loved as children, like special birthday breakfasts and handwritten cards. I believed that family bonds were strong enough to weather the inevitable changes that came with aging and evolving relationships. Which is why I was so excited when they all agreed to come to my house for Christmas last year. I hadn't hosted Christmas in 5 years, not since Gerald passed away. The first few holidays after losing him, I couldn't bear the thought of celebrating in our home without him. Then, as I slowly healed, my children took turns hosting at their larger, more modern homes. But last year I wanted to bring everyone back to the house where they grew up, to create new memories in the space that held so many old ones. My house isn't fancy. A modest 3-bedroom ranch that Gerald and I bought when Eleanor was on the way. We'd never upgraded to something bigger or more impressive, choosing instead to put money aside for the kids' education. The kitchen is outdated by today's standards, with laminate countertops instead of granite and appliances that are functional rather than flashy. But it's well-maintained, clean, and filled with love. I started preparations 3 months in advance. First, I deep-cleaned every corner, climbing on step stools to dust the tops of cabinets and getting down on my knees to scrub baseboards. My joints protested, but I pushed through the discomfort. I wanted everything to be perfect. Next came the decorations. I carefully unpacked the ornaments the children had made throughout their school year: salt dough handprints, popsicle stick picture frames, clothespin reindeer with googly eyes. I hung the needlepoint stockings I'd made when each grandchild was born, alongside the increasingly ragged ones that had belonged to my children. I set up the nativity scene Gerald had carved by hand during our first year of marriage. The shopping required careful planning. I live on a fixed income, my nurse's pension and Gerald's Social Security. After paying my property taxes, utilities, and medications for my arthritis and high blood pressure, there isn't much left for luxuries. But Christmas gifts weren't luxuries to me. They were essential expressions of love. I created a spreadsheet to track my gift ideas and spending. For each of my 11 family members, I wanted something meaningful, something that showed I was paying attention to who they were and what they cared about. For Eleanor, I'd been saving my mother's vintage cameo brooch. Eleanor had always admired it when she was younger, and now that she'd reached a prominent position in her law firm, I thought she could wear it with her court suits. I had it professionally cleaned and placed in a new velvet box. For Thomas, Eleanor's husband, I found a first edition of his favorite mystery novel at a used bookstore. I'd spent weeks visiting different shops until I located it. For Sophia, my teenage granddaughter, I bought a delicate silver necklace with a camera charm, acknowledging her growing interest in photography, perhaps the one passion we truly shared. For Nathan, I found a vintage calculator watch, knowing his appreciation for both technology and retro items. Robert received a leather-bound journal with his initials embossed on the cover. He'd mentioned wanting to write down memories for his children, something I'd encouraged. For Jessica, I selected a hand-painted silk scarf in colors that complemented her complexion. Their children each received gifts tailored to their interests: a professional art set for Lily, who showed remarkable talent, a set of adventure books for Jackson, the family explorer, and a handcrafted dollhouse for little Emma that I'd found at an estate sale and painstakingly refurbished. For Amanda, I discovered a rare medical text from the 1920s about the history of pediatric medicine. She collected such books, displaying them in her home office. Daniel received a limited edition of poetry by his favorite author. And for the twins, I knitted matching sweaters in different colors: blue for William and purple for Abigail, with their initials worked into the pattern. Each tiny stitch represented hours of work and love, completed in the evenings while my arthritic hands still had enough dexterity. Altogether, these gifts represented nearly 3 months of careful saving and strategic shopping. I'd gone without my weekly lunch at the senior center, and cut back on my medications when possible to afford everything. But the thought of their faces when they opened these thoughtfully selected presents made every sacrifice worthwhile. The food preparations were equally detailed. I made Christmas cookies from recipes passed down through generations, prepared homemade cranberry sauce, and ordered a ham from the local butcher that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I wanted this Christmas to be memorable, a reminder of family traditions and the comfort of coming home. As I worked, I found myself talking to Gerald as if he were still there, asking his opinion on gift wrapping or telling him about our grandchildren's latest accomplishments. "They're growing so fast," I told his picture on the mantel. "I wish you could see them." The day before Christmas Eve, I stood in my living room surveying my work. The tree lights twinkled, reflecting off ornaments both old and new. Presents were arranged beneath, wrapped in coordinating papers with handwritten tags. The dining table was set with my best china wedding gifts from all those years ago, and fresh pine boughs created a fragrant centerpiece. Despite the ache in my back and the fatigue settling into my bones, I felt a surge of excitement. Tomorrow my family would fill these quiet rooms with noise and life again. I would watch my grandchildren's eyes light up with wonder. My children would remember what it was like to be young in this house. We would reconnect, rebuild any bridges that had weakened over time. At least that's what I hoped. Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow, just enough to make the landscape look like a greeting card. I woke early, despite having been up until midnight making final preparations. There was still plenty to do. The ham needed to go in the oven, the potatoes needed peeling, and I wanted to do one final check of the guest rooms where Eleanor's and Amanda's families would be staying overnight. Robert and his family lived close enough to drive home after our celebration. By noon, my back was already protesting, but I ignored it. This day wasn't about me and my aches and pains. It was about creating a perfect Christmas for my family. Eleanor's car pulled into the driveway first, right on time as always. Thomas unloaded their luggage while Eleanor directed the teenagers to carry in several shopping bags filled with wrapped presents. I opened the front door with a wide smile, arms outstretched for hugs. "Merry Christmas," I called out. Sophia gave me a quick side hug before asking about the Wi-Fi password. Nathan nodded in my direction, his attention focused on his phone. Thomas offered a warm "Merry Christmas, Margaret," and a gentle hug before returning to the car for more bags. Eleanor kissed my cheek briefly. "The house looks festive, Mom. Very traditional." Her tone suggested this wasn't entirely a compliment. She glanced around critically. "Did you really put up all the old decorations? I thought you might have updated things by now." Before I could respond, she was issuing instructions to her children about where to put the gifts and reminding them not to touch anything breakable. I swallowed my disappointment at their lukewarm greeting and led them inside. "I've prepared your old room for you and Thomas," I told Eleanor. "And Sophia and Nathan can stay in Robert's old room." I put in a new air mattress for Nathan. Eleanor frowned. "Mom, Sophia and Nathan don't share rooms anymore. They're teenagers. Sophia can take the room, and Nathan will need his own space." "Oh," I said, mentally rearranging my plans. "Well, Nathan could take Amanda's old room, but she and Daniel and the twins." "We'll figure it out," Eleanor interrupted, already walking toward the kitchen. "What's that smell? Is something burning?" I hurried after her, suddenly remembering the rolls I'd put in the oven. They weren't burning, just turning a perfect golden brown. But Eleanor had already opened the oven door and was reaching for them. "I've got it," I said, gently moving her aside. "Why don't you all get settled while I finish up in here?" Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue but was interrupted by the sound of another car in the driveway. Amanda and her family had arrived. The next hour was a whirlwind of greetings, luggage, and reorganizing sleeping arrangements. Amanda's twins immediately ran to the Christmas tree, exclaiming over the lights and ornaments. Daniel helped carry in their bags while Amanda surveyed the living room. "Mom, there's hardly any floor space with this tree and all these decorations," she said. "Where are the twins supposed to play?" "I thought they might enjoy the basement rec room," I suggested. "I set up Gerald's old train set down there, and there's plenty of space." Amanda shook her head. "The basement is too cold and damp for them. We'll need to rearrange some of this." Without waiting for my response, she began moving side tables and lamps to create more open space. I bit my tongue, reminding myself that accommodating young children was important. Robert's family arrived last, bursting in with the chaotic energy that always surrounded them. His 3 children immediately began running through the house, their voices raised in excitement. "Indoor voices, please," I gently reminded them, but my words were lost in the commotion. Jessica air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. "Margaret, your Christmas sweater is interesting," she said, eyeing my red cardigan with its embroidered snowflakes. "Very grandmotherly." I wasn't sure how to take that comment considering I was in fact a grandmother. Robert gave me a one-armed hug while checking something on his phone with his free hand. "Hey Mom. Sorry we're late. Traffic was a nightmare." He finally looked up and glanced around. "Wow, it's like stepping back in time in here. Nothing ever changes, huh?" I forced a smile. Some things are worth preserving. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself increasingly relegated to the background of my own gathering. Eleanor reorganized my kitchen cabinets while preparing the vegetable side dishes, commenting that my system made no logical sense. Robert set up a portable speaker, replacing the Christmas carols I'd been playing with contemporary music that drowned out conversation. Amanda followed me around with a lint roller, removing cat hair from furniture even though my beloved Tabby Muffin had passed away 3 years ago. I overheard fragments of conversations not meant for my ears as I moved between rooms. "Smells like old person in here," Jessica whispered to Robert in the hallway. "Could sell this place and get her a nice condo," Eleanor murmured to Thomas while arranging presents under the tree. "Technology completely passed her by," Amanda said to Daniel while pointing at my old desktop computer in the corner of the living room. Each comment stung, but I kept a smile fixed on my face. This was Christmas, after all. A time for joy and togetherness, not confrontation. The final blow came when it was time to serve dinner. I had spent hours preparing the meal, using recipes handed down through generations of my family. The table was beautifully set, candles lit, everything ready for us to gather as a family. "Mom," Eleanor said, a note of condescension in her voice, "why don't you let us handle serving? You look tired, and we don't want you dropping anything heavy." Before I could protest, Amanda added, "Yes, you sit down. You've been on your feet all day, and at your age, that's not good for your circulation." Robert nodded in agreement. "Jessica and I can carve the ham. You just relax, Mom." And just like that, I was a guest at my own dinner table, watching as my children took over, rearranged my carefully planned serving dishes, and even changed some of my place settings because the flow works better this way, according to Jessica. As we finally sat down to eat, Robert raised his glass for a toast. To family gatherings in the house where it all began. Some things never change, and maybe that's good sometimes. It should have been a nice sentiment, but the way his eyes swept over my old-fashioned dining room made it clear what he really meant. Mom and her house are stuck in the past. I took a small sip of wine and tried to focus on the positives. My family was here, my grandchildren were healthy and happy, and tomorrow would be Christmas Day with presents and more quality time together. But as I looked around at my children's successful, confident adults who seemed increasingly foreign to me, I couldn't help but wonder when exactly I had transformed in their eyes from mom to elderly woman who needs managing. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. Despite the tensions of the previous day, I woke with renewed hope. Gift exchanges had always been special in our family, a time when the thought behind each present mattered more than its monetary value. Surely today would remind my children of the loving family we had always been. I rose early to prepare a special breakfast. Cinnamon rolls made from scratch, a breakfast casserole with everyone's favorite ingredients, and fresh fruit salad. By the time the first stirrings of movement came from upstairs, the house was filled with delicious aromas, and I had already set the table with my Christmas china. The grandchildren were the first to appear, their excitement about presents overcoming their desire to sleep in. Little Emma ran straight to me for a hug. "Grandma, did Santa come here too?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Of course he did," I assured her, smoothing her tangled hair. "Santa knows where all the good children are on Christmas." Gradually, the adults emerged, clutching coffee cups and still looking half asleep. We gathered around the table for breakfast, and for a little while it felt like old times. The children's excitement was contagious, and even Eleanor cracked a genuine smile when William told an elaborate story about how he had nearly caught Santa in the act. After breakfast, we moved to the living room for the gift exchange. I sat in my old armchair, the one Gerald had always claimed was the most comfortable seat in the house, while everyone else arranged themselves on the sofas and floor. Robert appointed himself Santa, taking on the role of distributing gifts from under the tree. The next hour was a flurry of torn wrapping paper, exclamations of delight, and the clicking of phone cameras capturing each moment. I watched with growing warmth as my carefully selected gifts were opened. Sophia gasped when she unwrapped the silver camera necklace. "Grandma, this is actually really cute. How did you know I was into photography?" "I pay attention," I said simply, though I wanted to add that we'd had several conversations about her photography class that she apparently didn't remember. Nathan seemed genuinely pleased with the calculator watch, immediately figuring out how to use all its functions. Lily hugged her professional art supplies close to her chest, her eyes shining. "This is better than the ones Mom and Dad got me," she whispered, making me smile. One by one, my gifts were opened and appreciated, though perhaps not as effusively as the more expensive presents from their parents. Still, I was content. They were acknowledging the thought I'd put into each selection. Eleanor seemed momentarily speechless when she opened the velvet box containing my mother's cameo brooch. "Mom, this was Grandma's," she said quietly. "Yes," I confirmed. "I thought it was time for you to have it. You always admired it, and I know you'll wear it well." For a brief moment I saw my daughter as she once was. The little girl who would sit at my dressing table, trying on my costume jewelry and dreaming of being grown up. Then she carefully closed the box and set it aside with a murmured "thank you," before turning her attention to her next gift. Amanda ran her fingers reverently over the cover of the antique medical text. "This must have been difficult to find," she acknowledged. "It will look perfect in my collection." "In my collection," I noted. Not "I can't wait to read it," or "this is fascinating." Just another object to display. Robert seemed genuinely surprised by his leather journal. "Wow, Mom, this is actually really nice," he said, sounding as if he hadn't expected me capable of selecting something tasteful. As the pile of open presents grew and the floor disappeared under discarded wrapping paper, I realized something was wrong. Everyone had opened multiple gifts, from each other, from spouses, from children. I had received a handful of clearly last-minute items from my grandchildren, handmade cards, a clay pin shaped vaguely like a cat, a drawing of what might have been me or might have been a friendly witch. I treasured these offerings from the little ones, knowing they came from the heart. But there was nothing from my adult children. Nothing from Eleanor, Robert, or Amanda. As the last present was distributed, another gift for Jessica from Robert, an awkward silence fell over the room. The adults exchanged glances while the younger children, oblivious to the tension, played with their new toys. "Is that everything?" I asked finally, unable to bear the silence any longer. Eleanor cleared her throat. "Mom, about your gift." She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. We couldn't really find anything that suited your age or taste." Robert jumped in, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything seemed either too young or too obvious," Amanda added. "You know, like slippers or a robe." "Which you already have plenty of," Eleanor pointed out quickly. "We thought maybe after the holidays, you could tell us what you might want," Robert continued, already reaching for his phone as if the uncomfortable moment was now resolved. "Or we could take you shopping," Amanda suggested brightly. "A day out would be nice, right?" I sat very still, my hands folded in my lap. Around me, 11 people, my family, my flesh and blood, were surrounded by gifts. Thoughtful gifts. Expensive gifts. Gifts I had selected for them, and gifts they had carefully chosen for each other. But not for me. Not for the woman who had carried them in her body, who had sacrificed sleep and dreams and personal ambitions to raise them. Not for the grandmother who remembered every birthday, who babysat without complaint, who still sent care packages to adult grandchildren away at college. In that moment I felt completely invisible. As if I had already faded away, and they were simply tolerating the space I still occupied in their lives. Amanda must have sensed something of what I was feeling, because she quickly stood up and handed me a serving tray from the coffee table. "Mom, would you mind passing around the cinnamon rolls? Everyone's ready for seconds, I think." And that was it. From gift giver to serving staff in the space of a moment. The final confirmation of how they saw me, not as a full person with feelings, interests, and value, but as an aging relative useful primarily for what she could provide: food, childcare, a venue for holidays when convenient. I took the tray mechanically, my chest physically aching with hurt. As I moved around the room offering rolls to everyone, I noticed how quickly the conversation had moved on, how easily they had dismissed the awkwardness of giving me nothing while surrounded by their own bounty. "These are delicious, Margaret," Thomas said kindly as he took a roll, the only one who seemed to notice my silent distress. I managed a tight smile in response, afraid that if I spoke, my voice would break and the tears pressing behind my eyes would fall. I would not cry. I would not make a scene and ruin Christmas for the grandchildren. But as I returned to the kitchen with the empty tray, I caught sight of my reflection in the window above the sink. An older woman looked back at me, her eyes sad, her shoulders slightly stooped. When had I started to look so defeated? When had I accepted that this was all I deserved? Gerald would be so disappointed in me, I thought suddenly. Not because of how our children were treating me, but because of how I was allowing it. Stand up for yourself, Maggie. He used to tell me when I would put everyone else's needs before my own. You matter too. I placed the tray down on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, taking several deep breaths. I thought of my own mother in her final years, how she had gradually become background noise in her children's lives. I had promised myself I wouldn't let that happen to me, yet here I was following the same path. No, I decided. Not today. Not anymore. I stood at the kitchen sink for what felt like a long time, the sounds of cheerful conversation and children's laughter drifting in from the living room. My family had moved on from the awkward gift exchange moment as if it had never happened. Perhaps in their minds it wasn't even significant enough to remember. But for me, it was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals and growing invisibility. The proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up late wrapping their presents, the careful budgeting I'd done to afford gifts that would make them smile, the genuine excitement I'd felt imagining their reactions. I thought about how they couldn't be bothered to even pick up a token gift. A book, a scarf, anything to acknowledge that I existed and had desires and preferences like anyone else. Looking at my reflection again, I made a decision. I slowly walked to my bedroom, closing the door softly behind me. From the back of my closet, I retrieved a manila envelope I'd been saving for a special announcement. This wasn't how I had planned to share my news, but perhaps it was exactly what was needed now. I also picked up my phone and opened my photo gallery, scrolling to a specific folder. Then I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and returned to the living room. No one noticed me at first. Robert and Jessica were showing off their new smartwatches to Eleanor and Thomas. Amanda was helping the twins build something with their new construction set. The older grandchildren were absorbed in their electronic devices. I walked quietly to the entertainment center and unplugged the television, which had been playing a Christmas movie in the background. Then I picked up the Bluetooth microphone from the karaoke set Robert had given the children last night. "What's wrong with the TV?" Robert asked, looking up with annoyance. "Mom, we were watching that," Eleanor added, reaching for the remote as if to solve the problem. I turned on the microphone, the small feedback sound finally capturing everyone's attention. "Actually," I said, my voice coming through the speakers with surprising clarity despite my shaking hands, "there's one gift I saved for last." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from confusion to mild annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing?" Amanda asked, her voice carrying a warning note that I chose to ignore. "I'm sharing something important with my family," I replied, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. "Something I've been wanting to tell you for some time." Eleanor exchanged a worried glance with Robert. I could almost read their thoughts. Is Mom having some kind of episode? Should we be concerned? 3 years ago, I continued, after your father passed away and I found myself alone in this house, I decided it was time to revisit some dreams I had put aside. Dreams that had nothing to do with being a wife, a mother, or a grandmother, though I cherish all those roles. I paused, looking at each of my children's faces. They appeared completely baffled. "I enrolled in a photography class at the community college," I said. "Something I had wanted to do since I was younger than Sophia is now." "That's nice, Mom," Robert said slowly, clearly wondering where this was going. "It was more than nice, Robert. It was transformative." I set down the microphone and reached for my phone, opening the photo gallery I had prepared. I discovered I had an eye for composition, for capturing moments that tell a story. My instructor encouraged me to enter some local competitions. I handed my phone to Eleanor, who was closest to me. "These are some of my photographs." Eleanor took the phone with a slightly patronizing smile that froze as she swiped through the images. Her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise. "Mom, these are really good," she said, sounding astonished. "May I see?" Thomas asked, leaning over. Eleanor passed him the phone. "Grandma, you took these?" Sophia asked, moving to look over Thomas's shoulder. "They're amazing." I retrieved the manila envelope I had placed on the side table. 2 months ago, I entered the Regional Photographer of the Year contest. I didn't tell any of you because I didn't want to hear well-meaning discouragement or concerns about me setting myself up for disappointment. The room was completely silent now, all eyes fixed on me. I won, I said simply, opening the envelope and removing the official letter with its gold seal. Grand prize. Out of over 2,000 entries. Amanda's mouth actually fell open. You won a photography contest? A major one. I nodded. The prize includes publication in Regional Arts Monthly and an all-expenses-paid photography tour of Italy for 4 people. 10 days exploring Tuscany, Rome, Venice, and the Amalfi Coast with professional photographers as guides. I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. My original plan was to surprise all 3 of you with the news that I wanted you to accompany me. A family trip. A chance to reconnect and create new memories together. That's what I've been saving for, planning for, excited about for weeks. Their expressions transformed from shock to excitement. Eleanor actually clasped her hands together, like she used to do as a little girl when thrilled about something. Mom, that's incredible! Robert exclaimed. Italy! Oh my goodness! Amanda added. I held up my hand, stopping their celebrations. That was my original plan, I repeated quietly. But today has made me reconsider. Their eager expressions faltered. Today made me realize that while I have made you 3 the center of my world, I have become peripheral in yours. An afterthought. Someone whose feelings don't need to be considered, whose interests don't need to be acknowledged, whose very presence is valued primarily for what I can provide rather than who I am. Mom, that's not fair, Eleanor protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I asked gently. You couldn't even be bothered to get me a Christmas present. Any present. While I spent months selecting meaningful gifts for each of you. You reorganize my home without asking, dismiss my opinions, and talk about me as if I'm not in the room. Or worse, as if I'm already gone. Robert had the grace to look ashamed. We didn't mean to make you feel that way. I know you didn't, I acknowledged. You didn't think about how I might feel at all. And that's the problem. I took back my phone and pulled up another photo. A group picture of me with 3 women about my age, all of us laughing as we posed in front of a sunset. These are my friends from my photography group. Judith, Patricia, and Dorothy. Women who see me as a whole person, who value my opinions, who share my interests and respect my experience. Women who would never dream of giving gifts to everyone in a room except me. I tucked the award letter back into its envelope. They will be joining me on the Italy trip instead. Mom! Amanda gasped. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious, I replied calmly. This trip represents something important to me. My rediscovery of myself as more than just your mother. I want to share it with people who see and appreciate that person. But we're your family, Eleanor said, sounding both indignant and hurt. Yes, you are. And I love you all deeply. That will never change. I looked around at their stunned faces. But being family doesn't give you the right to treat me as less than. It actually should hold you to a higher standard. The younger grandchildren had returned to their toys, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. But Sophia was looking at me with new eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. Grandma, she said quietly, can I see more of your photos? That simple request, that genuine interest in something I had created, nearly broke my composure. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak for a moment. I don't expect this one conversation to change everything. I continued when I had collected myself. Patterns established over years take time to break. But I need you all to understand something important. I am still here. Fully here. Not just as your mother or grandmother, but as Margaret Jenkins, a woman with talents, interests, feelings, and value. I picked up the serving tray that Amanda had handed me earlier. And I am not defined by my age, nor should I be dismissed because of it. I set the tray down deliberately on the coffee table. I won't be serving anymore today. I'd like to be treated as a guest in my own home for the remainder of your visit. The same courtesy you would extend to any other person you respect. With that, I turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving a stunned silence behind me. My heart was pounding, and I felt simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. I had never spoken to my children that way before. I had never really stood up for myself so clearly. As I pushed through the kitchen door, I heard Nathan's voice break the silence. Wow, Grandma's kind of a badass. Despite everything, I had to smile. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a strange, strained atmosphere. My children moved around me cautiously, as if I had suddenly transformed into someone they didn't recognize. In a way, perhaps I had. I certainly felt different, lighter somehow, despite the heaviness in my heart. I remained polite but firm in my new boundaries. When Jessica asked if I could help clean up the wrapping paper, I suggested that the children who had opened the presents might be better suited for that task. When Robert wondered aloud what was for lunch, I gestured to the refrigerator and told him to help himself to the leftovers from yesterday. In the afternoon, while the younger children napped and the adults gathered in the living room, Eleanor finally broached the subject again. "Mom," she began, her lawyer voice in full effect, "I think we need to discuss what happened this morning." I nodded. "I'm happy to talk about it." "We owe you an apology," Amanda said quickly, before Eleanor could continue. "You're right. We should have gotten you Christmas gifts. That was thoughtless and hurtful." "It wasn't just about the gifts," I reminded her gently, though that was certainly the clearest symbol of the problem. "What problem exactly?" Robert asked, sounding genuinely confused. "We've always been close. We visit. The kids adore you." "Yes, the grandchildren do," I agreed. "Children are wonderfully direct in their affections. But you three have increasingly treated me as ancillary. Someone to help with childcare or holiday preparations, but not someone whose thoughts and feelings need to be considered. Not someone with a life and identity beyond being your mother." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. "That's a pretty serious accusation, Mom." "It's not an accusation, Eleanor. It's an observation. And it's been happening so gradually that perhaps you haven't even noticed." I reached for my phone again and opened my photos. "Would you like to see more of my photography? The work that won a major regional award that none of you even knew I was pursuing." They nodded, still looking somewhat shell-shocked. I passed my phone to Amanda, who began to swipe through the images with Robert and Eleanor looking over her shoulders. "This is incredible," Robert murmured after a few moments. "This landscape series. The lighting is amazing. The portrait of that old man on the bench made me emotional," Amanda admitted. "You can feel his whole life story in his eyes." Eleanor looked up at me. "Mom, why didn't you tell us you were doing this? That you were this good?" I considered her question carefully. At first, it was something just for me. A private joy I didn't need to share. Then, as I improved and started entering local exhibitions, I did mention it. Several times, actually. Seeing their confused expressions, I continued. "I told you about my first small gallery showing last spring, Eleanor. You said you were busy with a case, but that sounds nice, Mom. I texted all of you when I won the Riverside Community Center competition in July. You sent back thumbs-up emojis. Understanding dawned on their faces. I showed you some of my photos when you came for Labor Day, Robert. You glanced at them and said they were pretty good for a hobby, before changing the subject to Jackson's soccer tournament." Robert winced. "I don't remember that, but it sounds like something I might say without thinking." "That's just it," I said softly. "Without thinking. My accomplishments, my interests, my growth as a person haven't seemed worth your full attention." I took back my phone and pulled up the award notification email. "This is the biggest recognition I've received. The judges specifically praised my unique perspective and emotional resonance. I've been invited to teach a workshop at next year's Regional Arts Conference." I showed them the email, watching as they read the glowing comments from established photographers and gallery owners. "The prize includes a monetary award that will cover some home repairs I've been putting off, plus the Italy trip. For people, all expenses paid for 10 days. Professional guides, luxury accommodations, special access to locations normally closed to tourists." Amanda looked up from the email, her eyes shining with excitement that quickly dimmed. "And you're really taking your friends instead of us?" "Yes," I said firmly. "This trip represents something important to me. My emergence as an artist in my own right. I want to share it with people who have supported that journey from the beginning, who have seen and appreciated my work as it developed." But we appreciate it now, Robert protested. Now that we've seen how amazing you are. That's the point though, isn't it? I replied. You only see it now that outside validation has forced you to take notice. My friends Judith, Patricia, and Dorothy saw value in my work, and in me long before any awards. They attended every small exhibition, offered thoughtful feedback on my compositions, celebrated each small victory along the way. Eleanor, ever the practical one, tried another approach. Mom, this trip sounds amazing truly, but wouldn't you rather share it with family? We could help with your equipment, make sure you're comfortable, keep track of your medications. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was little humor in it. And there it is again. You immediately assume I need managing, that I couldn't possibly handle an international trip without your supervision. Eleanor, I traveled through Southeast Asia as a young nurse. I've navigated foreign countries before. And my friends are perfectly capable companions. Thomas, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke up. I think what Margaret is saying is that she wants to be seen as a complete person, not just as a mother or grandmother who needs looking after. I gave him a grateful smile. Exactly, Thomas. Thank you. The twins came bounding into the room then, effectively ending our discussion as they demanded attention from their mother. But I could see the wheels turning in my children's minds as they processed everything I had said. Later that evening, after dinner, which Robert and Jessica had prepared, a first in our family gatherings, Sophia approached me as I sat in the living room looking through a photography magazine. Grandma, could you show me some techniques sometime? For my photography, she asked hesitantly. Your pictures are way better than anything I've taken. Her genuine interest touched me deeply. I'd love that, Sophia. Perhaps you could come stay with me for a weekend, and we could do a proper photo expedition. Her face lit up. Really? That would be awesome. From across the room, I caught Eleanor watching our interaction with a thoughtful expression. When our eyes met, she gave me a small nod, as if something important had finally clicked into place for her. The rest of the evening passed more comfortably than I had expected. My children were quieter than usual, more observant. I noticed Robert actually listening when I mentioned a book I'd recently enjoyed, rather than immediately changing the subject to something about his own life. Amanda asked follow-up questions about my photography technique instead of dismissing my hobby. Eleanor refrained from reorganizing anything in my house. They were trying. It was a start. As everyone prepared for bed, Eleanor lingered in the living room after the others had gone upstairs. Mom, she said quietly, I've been thinking about what you said, about how we've been treating you. I waited, giving her space to continue. I think I've been so caught up in my own life, my career, the kids, that I've been taking you for granted. She looked down at her hands. And maybe part of me has been trying to position myself as the authority figure? Like I needed to take over because you're getting older. I am getting older, I acknowledged. But that doesn't make me less capable or less worthy of respect. It certainly doesn't make my thoughts and feelings less valid. I know that, she said quickly. At least I should know that. But somewhere along the way I started seeing you differently. Not as the strong, capable mom who raised us, but as someone who might need managing. Her honesty was refreshing. Thank you for recognizing that, I said. It means a lot to me. The photography award is incredible, Mom. Truly. And I'm sorry I didn't pay attention when you tried to share your passion with us before. She hesitated. I understand why you want to take your friends to Italy. I don't like it, but I understand. I reached out and squeezed her hand. This doesn't change how much I love you, Eleanor. Or Robert or Amanda. You are still my children, and I am still your mother. I'm just asking that you see me as more than that too. She nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. I'll try to do better. We all will. As I headed to my bedroom later, I passed the guest room where Amanda and Daniel were staying. The door was partially open, and I could hear them talking in low voices. I had no idea Mom was so accomplished at photography, Amanda was saying. I feel terrible that I didn't even know about it. It's like she said, Daniel replied. You weren't really listening when she tried to tell you. But why wouldn't I listen? That's what's bothering me. Maybe, Daniel suggested gently, It's because acknowledging her ongoing growth and new passions doesn't fit with the narrative you've created, that she's getting older and gradually becoming less capable, less relevant. There was a long pause before Amanda responded. That's uncomfortably perceptive. I moved on quietly, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but feeling a glimmer of hope that real change might be possible after all. 1 week after Christmas, my phone rang. It was Eleanor, asking if I was free for a family meeting on New Year's Day. All 3 of my children wanted to come over to talk.
No spouses, no grandchildren.
Just us. I agreed, curious and a little apprehensive about what they might have to say. Had they simply had time to formulate better arguments about why I should take them to Italy instead of my friends? Or was this something more meaningful? When New Year's Day arrived, I prepared a simple lunch, soup and sandwiches, and waited for my children. They arrived together in Eleanor's car. Another unusual occurrence that piqued my interest. After greeting me with warmer, more genuine hugs than I had received at Christmas, they settled in the living room. I noticed they had brought a large gift bag and a flat package wrapped in silver paper. "Mom," Eleanor began, taking the unofficial role of spokesperson, "we've done a lot of thinking since Christmas, and a lot of talking with each other." "Which is rare enough in itself," Robert added with a self-deprecating smile. "We realized," Amanda continued, "that we owe you more than just an apology for not getting you Christmas presents. We owe you an apology for how we've been treating you for longer than any of us are comfortable admitting." Eleanor nodded. "I've been reflecting on when this pattern started. For me, I think it began when I made partner at the firm. Suddenly I was the authority figure in so many contexts that I started carrying that attitude everywhere. Even with you." "For me," Robert said, "I think it was more gradual. The more successful I became professionally, the more I started viewing everyone in my life through the lens of what they could contribute to my goals or my family's needs. I stopped seeing you as a person with your own goals and needs." Amanda looked down at her hands. "I think I've been afraid of my own aging. Every time I acknowledged your accomplishments or independence, it forced me to confront the fact that I'm getting older too. It was easier to focus on what you might need help with than to celebrate your continued growth." Their insights surprised me. I hadn't expected such honest self-reflection. "Thank you for sharing that," I said. "It helps me understand what's been happening between us." "We also realized," Eleanor continued, "that each of us has critical moments in our lives when you put everything aside to be there for us, moments we've conveniently forgotten, when it suited us to think of you as less capable." Robert nodded. "When my business failed in my 20s and I had to move back home for 6 months, you never made me feel like a failure. You helped me rebuild my confidence while giving me the space to figure things out. When I was struggling with postpartum depression after the twins," Amanda added, "you came and stayed with us for weeks. You took care of them during the night so I could sleep. You probably saved my marriage. And when I lost that huge case 3 years ago," Eleanor said quietly, "you were the only one who didn't offer advice or try to fix things. You just listened and reminded me that my worth wasn't tied to my professional success." I felt tears gathering in my eyes. They did remember. They did know who I was and what I had done for them. Somewhere along the way they had just forgotten to keep seeing me. "We brought you something," Robert said, reaching for the gift bag. "2 things actually. First, this is your very belated Christmas gift." He handed me the bag. Inside was a state-of-the-art camera, the exact model I had mentioned wanting months ago when I showed Amanda some of my photos. It was accompanied by several high-quality lenses and accessories. "This is extremely generous," I said, genuinely touched. "But also quite expensive. We all contributed," Eleanor explained. "And before you worry about us spending too much, know that this isn't just a reaction to feeling guilty. It's an investment in your talent and your passion. You've earned this, Mom." Amanda reached for the flat package next. "And this is something else we wanted to give you." I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautifully framed document, a confirmation of a reservation for a luxury home photography studio setup, complete with professional lighting, backdrops, and editing equipment, all to be installed in what had once been Robert's bedroom. "We thought that since you're becoming known for your work, you should have a proper space to create," Amanda explained. "The company will come next week to transform the room. Unless you prefer a different space." I was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by not just the gifts themselves but what they represented: my children's acknowledgement and support of my identity as an artist. "These are wonderful gifts," I finally managed. "Thank you." "There's one more thing," Eleanor said. "About the Italy trip." I tensed slightly, preparing to defend my decision again. "We understand and respect that you want to take your friends," she continued, surprising me. "They've supported your photography journey from the beginning, and they deserve to share in this celebration of your success." "But," Robert added, "we were hoping you might consider an additional proposition." "What's that?" I asked cautiously. "The prize is for a trip for 4 people this year," Amanda explained. "What if, in future years, you allowed one of us to accompany you on a photography trip? We could rotate, Eleanor 1 year, Robert the next, then me. A chance for each of us to see this side of you, to share in your passion, to get to know you as not just our mother, but as Margaret the artist." Their suggestion took me by surprise. It wasn't what I had expected at all. It was better a recognition that our relationship needed to evolve, not just revert to what it had been before. "I would like that very much," I said, smiling through my tears. "We've also established some new family rules," Robert said, pulling out his phone and reading from his notes. "Number 1. No making decisions for Mom without consulting her first. Number 2. Ask about her photography and other interests regularly. Number 3. No dismissing her opinions or suggestions based on her age. Number 4, Amanda continued. Remember that she is a complete person with her own life and identity outside of being our mother. Number 5. Treat her with the same respect we would give to any accomplished adult we admire. And number 6, Eleanor finished. Remember that getting older doesn't mean becoming less. It often means becoming more, as Mom has so clearly demonstrated. I looked at my 3 children, successful, intelligent adults who had humbled themselves enough to acknowledge their mistakes and commit to change. My heart swelled with a complex mixture of pride, love, and hope. "Thank you," I said simply. "This means more to me than you know." 6 months later, I held my first major photography exhibition. My Italy photos formed the centerpiece of the collection, displayed prominently in the Community Arts Center, where I had once taken my first tentative photography class. As I stood greeting visitors and discussing my work, I caught sight of my family arriving together. All 3 of my children, their spouses, and all 7 grandchildren, dressed in their best clothes and bearing flowers. They moved through the exhibition slowly, taking time to actually look at each photograph, reading the accompanying descriptions, engaging with my art as they would any other serious artist's work. Sophia stayed closest to me, proudly telling anyone who would listen, "That's my grandmother. She's teaching me everything she knows." Later, as we celebrated over dinner, I reflected on how much had changed since that painful Christmas morning. Our relationship wasn't perfect. Old habits occasionally resurfaced, and I sometimes had to gently remind them of our new boundaries. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted. They were seeing me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time in years. And I was seeing myself differently too. No longer just a mother and grandmother, though those roles remained precious to me, but a woman with her own identity, passions, and value. "Mom," Eleanor said, raising her glass in a toast, "to your incredible talent and to many more years of watching you pursue your passions and surprise us all. And to standing up for yourself," Robert added with a wink. "Best gift you ever gave us, even if we didn't know it at the time." As glasses clinked around the table, I thought about all the women my age who might be experiencing what I had: the slow erosion of identity, the gradual dismissal by loved ones, the struggle to remain visible in a world that often looks past older women. I hope my story might inspire some of you watching to reconsider how you see the older adults in your life. Are you truly seeing them as complete people with ongoing dreams, talents, and potential? Or have you unconsciously relegated them to supporting roles in your narrative? And for those of you who recognize yourselves in my experience, remember, it's never too late to remind the people you love that you are still here, still growing, still valuable beyond measure. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is the courage to stand up for your own worth. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Have you experienced similar treatment as you've gotten older? Or have you realized you might be doing this to someone you love? Please share your thoughts and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that might just change how you see the world and the people in it. Thank you for listening, and remember, every stage of life brings new possibilities if we're brave enough to reach for them.